My parents gave my sister the latest iPhone for Christmas. You've earned it. Dad said proudly. I opened my gift $1 store notebook and a pen that didn't work. Mom snickered. My sister laughed. I forced a smile, but that night, I walked away. Days later, my parents called. Christmas had always been my favorite time of year. Even as I got older, I still felt that little spark of excitement as December rolled around. It wasn't about the gifts. I knew I wasn't a little kid anymore. It was the feeling of it all. The lights twinkling softly in the living room, the smell of cinnamon and pine filling the house, the way everything just felt warmer despite the cold outside. Most of all, I loved the tradition. Every year, my family had the same Christmas morning routine. We'd wake up early, still in our pajamas, and gather in the living room, mugs of hot chocolate in hand. Mom would always put on that same old Christmas playlist. Songs I had heard 1,000 times before but still made me smile. Dad would pass out gifts, one at a time. So everyone got a turn opening something while the rest of us watched. It was something small, something familiar, something I thought we all cherished. This year felt different, though it started with little things. My parents had been distant in the weeks leading up to Christmas, barely acknowledging me unless they needed something. Conversations felt short and forced, like they were just going through the motions. My younger sister, Jane, on the other hand, had been getting all their attention. They talked to her constantly about school, her soccer games, her friends. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was nothing, that maybe I was just reading too much into things. But deep down, I felt it. I just didn't expect Christmas morning to confirm it so clearly. That morning, I woke up to the sound of Jane laughing downstairs. The smell of coffee drifted through the air. And for a brief moment, I smiled. I shook off the uneasy feeling in my chest, pushing aside the nagging thought that something was off. I made my way downstairs, rubbing the sleep from my eyes as I stepped into the living room. The tree stood tall in the corner, glowing with soft, colorful lights. The usual pile of presents sat beneath it, perfectly wrapped with shiny bows. Dad and Mom were already on the couch, sipping their coffee. Jane sat cross-legged on the floor, her face practically glowing with excitement. "There you are," Dad said, flashing me a quick smile. "We were just about to start without you." I sat down on the floor next to Jane, trying to shake the feeling of unease creeping up my spine. Maybe I was just overthinking things. Maybe this year would feel like every other. Dad reached under the tree and grabbed a gift, handing it to Jane first. Just like always, she tore into it, and I watched as she pulled out a pair of brand new sneakers, the kind she'd been talking about nonstop for weeks. Her eyes lit up, and she looked up at our parents. "No way, these are sick." Dad laughed. "We knew you'd love them." Mom chuckled. "There's plenty more where that came from, honey." I smiled at Jane. "Nice," I said, trying to match her excitement. "Those are cool." She barely glanced at me before moving on to her next gift. I sat quietly as she unwrapped present after present, high-end clothes, a gaming headset, a gift card to her favorite store. With each new thing she unwrapped, I felt my stomach tighten. And then Dad handed her the big one, a sleek, perfectly wrapped box with a bright red bow. Jane's eyes widened as she grabbed it, practically ripping the paper off in one motion. Her jaw dropped as she held up the latest iPhone, still in its untouched packaging. "No way," she shouted. "This is insane." Dad beamed. "You've earned it," he said, ruffling her hair. Mom clapped her on the back. "You work hard, kiddo. You deserve it." Jane grinned, turning the box over in her hands. "This is the best Christmas ever." I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing myself to smile. Then, Dad turned to me. "Oh, almost forgot," he said. Reaching under the tree, he pulled out a small, lumpy package wrapped hastily in thin paper. "Here you go." I took it slowly, suddenly aware of how silent the room had become. The wrapping crinkled in my hands as I peeled it away, revealing a cheap, flimsy notebook. The kind you find at the dollar store with a thin cardboard cover and lined pages that felt rough to the touch. I blinked. I reached inside the package again and pulled out a single plastic pen. I clicked it. Nothing. The ink was dry. For a moment, I just stared at it, my mind struggling to process what I was looking at. Then a snicker broke the silence. I looked up. Mom was smirking. Jane burst out laughing. "Wow," she said, shaking her head. "Guess someone wasn't that good this year." Dad just sipped his coffee. Not saying a word, I forced a smile, gripping the notebook tightly in my hands. "Thanks," I muttered. Nobody responded. And in that moment, something inside me cracked. That night, long after the laughter had died down and everyone had gone to bed, I lay in my room staring at the ceiling. The cheap notebook sat on my desk unopened. The dead pen lay beside it. Useless, I tried to push the thoughts away, tried to tell myself that I was overreacting. It's just a gift, I thought. It's not about the presents. It's about family. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't about the gifts. It was about what they represented. Jane had gotten everything she wanted. Mom and Dad had spent months listening to her, caring about what would make her happy, making sure she felt loved and appreciated. Me? I got a last-minute, thoughtless present. Something that screamed we didn't even try, that I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't caused problems. My grades were good. I helped around the house. I did everything they asked. And still, I was treated like an afterthought. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. I had spent years pretending it didn't bother me, laughing off the favoritism, telling myself that maybe one day they'd see me. That maybe if I worked harder, did more, was better, they would finally love me the way they loved her. But tonight, something in me shifted. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for them to care. I climbed out of bed as quietly as I could, my hands shaking. I grabbed my backpack from the corner of my room and started stuffing it with clothes, a hoodie, a couple of t-shirts, my savings, what little I had. I didn't have a real plan, but I knew one thing for sure, that I couldn't stay here. Not when it felt like I was invisible. Not when it hurt this much. I slipped on my shoes, took one last glance at my room, the same room I had spent my whole life in, and then I did something I never thought I would. I left. Days later, my phone buzzed. At first, I ignored it. I had been ignoring them for days. But then, the screen lit up again. 17 missed calls. Then, a text popped up, "Where are you? Please come back." My parents were panicked, but did they really care? Or were they just scared of what people would think? I took a deep breath. I had a choice to make. I stared at the phone for a long time, my finger hovering over the screen. The message was clear. They were looking for me, desperate for me to come back. But why? Was it because they missed me? Or was it just because everything had gotten too complicated and they didn't know how to fix it? I felt a wave of bitterness rise in my chest, but then another thought crept in. What if they were genuinely worried? What if they realized what they had done wrong? I turned the phone off, staring down at it for a while before putting it back in my pocket. I didn't know what to think anymore. My whole life, I had tried to prove myself. I had tried to be the son they would finally notice. The one they would look at with pride like they did with Jane. But all that time, all those years, I had been invisible. And now, they were panicking because I was gone. But were they panicking because they realized they messed up, or because they were losing control of their perfect image of a happy family? I didn't know. And right now, I wasn't sure if I wanted to find out. The next few days were the quietest I had ever known. I stayed at a friend's house, not telling anyone where I was. I spent my time thinking. Maybe I was being dramatic, but the more I thought about everything, the more I realized I was tired of always being the afterthought. A few days later, I received a call that it was Dad. He sounded frantic, almost pleading, "Please come home. We've been so worried. It's not like this. We promise we'll fix it. Just come home." I sat silently for a moment. Did I really want to go back? It took me a while, but I finally decided to pick up the phone. "I'm not coming back?" There was a long pause on the other end. "What do you mean? You need to come home. Your mother and I, we're sorry. We were wrong." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, but I wasn't sure if it was enough. "I don't know if I can believe you," I said softly. "You've treated me like I don't matter for years. It's not just about the presents, Dad. It's about how I've been invisible all this time. I don't know if I can just forget that." I hung up the phone and took a deep breath, my heart racing. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be anyone's second choice anymore. The days after that phone call felt like a blur. I spent most of my time reflecting, trying to find some sense of peace within myself. My mind kept bouncing back and forth. One minute, I felt like I was doing the right thing, standing up for myself. But the next, I felt a pang of guilt. I wasn't used to being defiant. I wasn't used to putting my foot down and demanding respect. My entire life, I had been the good son, the one who followed the rules and did everything expected of me. But now, I was walking away from everything that had once felt familiar. And it was hard that I thought about the Christmas morning, the look on my parents' faces when they handed Jane that shiny new phone, their pride so clear. I thought about the way I'd smiled through gritted teeth, pretending like everything was okay. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about Christmas. This was about years of being overlooked, of feeling like I didn't matter. And I didn't want to go back to that. But then, something happened. It was 2 weeks later when my dad showed up at my friend's house unannounced. I opened the door, startled to see him standing there, looking different. He was no longer the stern, distant figure I had known all my life. His eyes were red, and his face was pale as if he hadn't slept in days. "Can I talk to you?" he asked softly. I stood frozen for a moment, unsure what to do, but something in his voice made me hesitate. I stepped aside, letting him come in. We sat down in the living room, and for the first time in a long time, the silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was raw, almost fragile. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know I can't take back what happened, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. For years, I treated you like you didn't matter, and I know that now. I see it, and I hate myself for it. I could feel my chest tighten. This wasn't the apology I expected. I didn't expect him to take full responsibility like this, to admit his mistakes so openly, but there was something in his tone that made me want to believe him. You're not invisible, he continued, his voice cracking. I've always loved you, but I've been so caught up in making sure Jane had everything I thought she needed. I didn't realize how much I was neglecting you. You've always been enough, just the way you are. And I'm so sorry I made you feel otherwise. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to accept his apology, but another part of me felt like I needed more than just words. I don't know if I can just come back, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. It's going to take time. You can't just fix this with a few sentences. He nodded, tears falling from his eyes. I know, and I'll do whatever it takes to make it right, but I don't want to lose you. Please, just give me a chance. The weeks after that emotional confrontation with my dad were a mix of uncertainty and hope. Things were different now, but I wasn't about to just let my guard down completely. The pain of feeling unseen for so long didn't vanish overnight, and I couldn't just ignore the years of neglect. No matter how hard my parents tried to make things right, I spent more time with my mom and dad. But every now and then, I'd catch myself holding back, just in case. I had to make sure this wasn't some temporary change, some short-lived attempt at fixing things. I didn't want to be hurt again. But then something unexpected happened. One night. A few weeks after the apology, Jane called me. I'm sorry, she said, sounding genuine. I never meant to make you feel like that. I'm a jerk, and I didn't even realize what was going on until everything blew up. I didn't think about how you felt, and for that, I'm sorry. It felt strange to hear her say that. Jane and I had always had a sibling rivalry, but it was never this deep. We fought, sure, but it was the kind of fighting that felt normal, like any other brother and sister. But this? This felt different. This felt real. I wasn't sure what to say at first, but then I took a breath and replied, thank you. I didn't expect an apology from you, but it means a lot. She sounded relieved. I really do hope we can get along better. I don't want to be part of the problem anymore. Over the next few months, I watched my family slowly begin to change. I won't say everything was perfect overnight, because it wasn't. There were still awkward moments, still moments where I questioned if they really meant what they said. But gradually, the distance between us shrank. My parents started taking the time to ask me about my day, to check in on me without it feeling like a duty. And the best part? They stopped comparing me to Jane. I noticed it the most when I got a new job offer. Instead of the usual, well, Jane did this or Jane got that, I heard, we're so proud of you. As the months went on, things with my family began to settle. The apologies didn't feel as hollow anymore, and I could tell that my parents were genuinely trying to make things right. They were putting in effort, asking about my life and listening when I spoke. It wasn't perfect, and there were moments where I still felt a flicker of that old resentment, but things were better. And I could tell they were trying, Jane, too. Our relationship slowly improved. We had our awkward moments, but every conversation felt like a step forward. Sometimes we would joke around like we used to or talk about things we never had the chance to discuss before. And while I still wasn't ready to completely forget the past, I couldn't deny that I was starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, things could go back to some version of normal. I never expected that apology from Jane, and I still don't think she fully understood the depth of how much her actions had hurt me. But the fact that she made an effort, that she acknowledged what had happened, it meant something. The biggest change, though, came from my parents. They took responsibility, which was huge. For years, I had felt like I was invisible, like I didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And that Christmas morning, that was the tipping point. But in the months that followed, I saw them put their words into action. They didn't just apologize, they made sure I knew that I was valued. They made it clear that I was not second place, not an afterthought. It wasn't about the presents anymore. It was about the time, the attention, and the care. I started to see my parents as people, not just as figures in my life who only cared about their idea of a perfect family. But even with all of that, I realized something important. I had learned to stand up for myself. I had learned that it was okay to walk away when I needed to, and it was okay to demand more. For years, I had been silent, playing the role of the invisible child. But walking away? It made me realize I had a voice. I had a right to be heard. And maybe that was the most important lesson of all. So looking back, was it the right decision to leave? Was it the right decision to stand up for myself and demand respect, even if it meant hurting my family in the process? In the end, I think I did what I needed to do. It pushed my family to change, and it pushed me to find strength I didn't know I had. Honestly, I think I made the right call. It's tough to walk away from family, but sometimes it's the only way to get people to understand how much their actions have hurt you. What do you all think? Was Op right to leave, or should they have stayed and tried to work things out quietly? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you think Op handled it well, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. 3 years have passed since that Christmas morning that changed everything. I'm in my own apartment now, a small but comfortable space that feels like mine. The walls are decorated with photos, some new, some old, telling the story of how far we've all come. There's even one from last Christmas, all of us together, genuine smiles on our faces. It wasn't an easy road getting here. The first year after I left was the hardest. Even after that initial reconciliation, there were moments when old habits tried to creep back in. I remember the first family dinner I attended after moving back home. Jane had just gotten a promotion at her job, and for a brief moment, I saw Dad start to make that familiar comparison. But he caught himself, meeting my eyes with an apologetic look. Instead of comparing, he asked me about my new project at work. It was a small moment, but it meant everything. Mom took longer to adjust. She had always been the quieter parent, following Dad's lead in most things. But slowly, she started forming her own relationship with me. It started with coffee dates, just the two of us, where she'd listen, really listen, to what I had to say. No comparisons, no expectations, just genuine interest in my life and who I was as a person. The real test came when I decided to switch careers. I'd been working in finance, following the path everyone expected, but my heart wasn't in it. What I really wanted was to pursue music production, something I'd been passionate about since high school but had never dared to voice. The old me would have kept quiet, stuck to the safe path to avoid disappointing anyone. But I wasn't that person anymore. I called a family meeting, something we'd started doing monthly after everything that happened. Sitting in the living room, the same room where that Christmas disaster had unfolded, I told them about my decision. The silence that followed felt endless. Jane spoke first, surprising me. "That's amazing," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Remember when we were kids and you used to mix songs on that old laptop? You were always so good at it." I blinked, taken aback. I didn't even know she remembered that. Dad leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "Are you sure about this? It's a big change." There was concern in his voice, but not judgment. That was new. "I am," I replied, bracing myself for the disappointment I half expected to see. Instead, he nodded. "Then we'll support you. Just tell us what you need." Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. "We want you to be happy, sweetheart. Really happy, not just doing what you think we want." That conversation would have been unimaginable 3 years ago. But here we were, talking openly, honestly, each of us trying in our own way to be better. The changes weren't just in my family. I'd changed too. Learning to stand up for myself that Christmas morning had awakened something in me. I started therapy, working through years of feeling invisible and second best. I learned that it wasn't just about my family's behavior, it was about how I'd internalized it, how I'd learned to make myself smaller to fit their expectations. Jane and I started building a real relationship, not one based on competition or resentment. We found out we actually had a lot in common when we weren't being pitted against each other. She became one of my biggest supporters when I started my music production business, even investing some of her savings to help me get started. Last month, I produced my first album for an up-and-coming local artist. When it was finished, I invited my family to the studio for a private listening session. Watching their faces as the music played, seeing their genuine pride and interest, I felt something heal inside me. Dad didn't once mention that Jane's corporate job was more stable. Mom didn't make any worried comments about financial security. They just listened, really listened, just like they'd learned to listen to me. After the session, as we were leaving the studio, Jane pulled me aside. "You know," she said, "I used to be jealous of you too." I looked at her, surprised. "What? Why? You were always the favorite." She shook her head. "You were always so sure of who you were, even when you were quiet about it. I was just trying to be what they wanted. When you left that Christmas, it made me realize how much I was playing a role too." That conversation with Jane opened up a whole new understanding between us. We'd both been trapped in roles we never chose, she as the golden child, me as the invisible one. Breaking free of those roles had allowed us both to become who we really were. Dad changed the most dramatically. The stern, distant father who had snickered at my dollar store Christmas gift became someone who called regularly just to check in, who shared his own vulnerabilities and admitted when he was wrong. Last week, he confessed that he'd been raised in a similar environment of favoritism, always compared to his sister, never quite measuring up. "I did to you what was done to me," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I didn't even realize I was repeating the pattern until you had the courage to walk away." Mom found her voice too. She started standing up more, not just following Dad's lead. She began sharing stories about her own struggles with feeling invisible in her family, and how she'd projected those feelings onto our family dynamic without realizing it. The healing wasn't linear. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns emerged, times when I had to remind them, and myself, of the boundaries we'd established. But each time we stumbled, we got better at catching ourselves, at communicating, at making things right. This Christmas will be different. We're having dinner at my apartment, my choice, my space, my rules. Jane's bringing her new girlfriend, whom she felt safe introducing to the family now that the pressure to be perfect has lifted. Mom's actually excited about helping me cook instead of trying to take over the kitchen. Dad asked what music I wanted to play instead of just putting on his old playlist. The cheap notebook and dead pen from that Christmas morning sit in a box in my closet. I keep them as a reminder, not of the pain, but of the moment I found my voice. Sometimes the worst gifts turn out to be the most valuable, not for what they are, but for what they make you realize about yourself. Looking back now, I understand that walking away wasn't just about making my family see me. It was about learning to see myself. It was about realizing that being loved shouldn't require becoming invisible, that family shouldn't mean sacrificing who you are. The journey from that Christmas morning to today hasn't been easy. There were times I questioned everything, times I wondered if I'd made the right choice in coming back. But as I sit here in my apartment, looking at the family photos on my wall, real smiles, real connections, real love, I know that sometimes you have to break something to fix it properly. My story isn't over. We're still learning, still growing, still figuring out this new dynamic we've created. But now we're doing it together, each of us visible, each of us valued, each of us heard. And maybe that's what family is supposed to be all about. Update: wow, I didn't expect this post to blow up like it has. Thank you all for the supportive comments and messages. To those asking, yes, my music production business is doing well. I just signed my second artist, and Jane's been helping me with the business side of things. It's funny how life works out sometimes. And to everyone sharing similar stories in the comments, you're not alone. Sometimes standing up for yourself is the hardest thing you'll ever do, but it can also be the most important. Don't be afraid to demand the respect you deserve, even from family. Especially from family. Last edit: someone asked what happened to the dead pen and dollar store notebook. I actually ended up using that notebook to write my first song lyrics after I started pursuing music. Turns out sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. The pen though? Still doesn't work. Some things you just can't fix, but you can learn from them.